Hi everyone, welcome back to my kitchen. I'm Dianne Morin. Today I'm gonna actually make one of my kids' favorite breakfast cereal. So we're doing traditional Jamaican cornmeal porridge. I grew up eating this all the time. I remember when my mom came to visit me when I had my first son. It was like, no, you gotta make sure he gets cornmeal porridge in the mornings for breakfast when he's old enough to move away from formulas. So again, this is a super delicious hot breakfast meal that you can make with your kids. So let's get started. So we're gonna start with 1.5 cups of water, 1/4 cup of cornmeal, and I like to use, milk. So you don't have to use milk if you don't want. You can bump up your 1.5 cup of water to 2 cups of water. What you want to do is always mix in the cornmeal with the water first. And like I said, I'm using some milk. I'm actually doing half and half because I like it nice and creamy. So it's a 1/2 cup of half and half that I'm using. So you're gonna really end with about 2 cups of liquids. And you want to mix it really good so you break up the cornmeal so it doesn't, get lumpy. So this is all mixed pretty good. It's not hot. Room temperature water is fine. Cold milk is fine. You're going to then add it to your pot. I turned my stove on a little early so I can get the heating process going. But basically what you're doing is you're throwing in your mixed liquid cornmeal into the pot and get everything out. And I want to bring this to a boil. So let me get my spoon so I can scrape some of my cornmeal that settled on the bottom. You want to do the mixture in the pot. Here's why. You don't want lumpy cornmeal porridge, all right? So what I normally do is through the heating process, I want to bring it to a boil, but I don't want to let it sit and come to a boil, because if it does that, I'm going to end up with some lumps in here, and I don't want that to happen. All right. So every so often, I'm going to mix. So while that's doing its thing, I'm going to show you what I add to the pot for flavor. Sorry guys, I usually go with like a pinch of salt, because salt enhances flavor and brings it out a little bit more. So just a little sprinkle of salt goes in my pot. Here's my options for my next set of seasonings. Let me give it a stir again. So my option is either a cinnamon stick. This is a really big cinnamon stick. So if I was going to use this in this pot, I probably would maybe break it in half. And you don't want tons of little pieces. So, go with a small piece, like about this size. Or you could use cinnamon leaf. It looks like bay leaf, but it's not. It's cinnamon leaf. I actually picked this up when I went to Jamaica the last time. So if you can find it, cinnamon leaf. But most of the time I can't find it here in the US. So I tend to go with cinnamon stick. If I don't have cinnamon stick, cinnamon powder is fine. And also I'm going to use a little bit of nutmeg to add to this cornmeal porridge. So I'm going back. I'm stirring again, because I could feel that it's starting to kind of thicken up a bit. The boiling is what's going to help to keep that thick consistency. And again, like I said, just keep stirring. All right, so stir. It's starting to get thick. Now here is a good tip. If you don't like it super, super thick, just go ahead and add some additional water to the pot or additional milk to the pot. Usually I add water to the pot. I'm going to, like I said, I'm going to use my cinnamon stick leaf today because I want that to be infused. I'm going to do a little nutmeg, usually like about an 1/8 of a teaspoon, a very small amount, like a little bit more than a pinch of nutmeg. All right, get that in there. And like I said, if I want, I could use cinnamon powder in there, but I usually like to save the cinnamon powder for the end. I like to sprinkle it onto my cornmeal porridge as I'm about to serve it. So I see it starting to bubble, right? You guys can see those bubbles. I'm gonna turn this all the way down to low, and I'm gonna simmer. I'm gonna simmer for about 15 minutes because at this point I want the cornmeal to cook. And when I see like thick bubbles, I go, oh, okay, I have room to do a little bit more water. So I'm gonna just take some water from my tea kettle. I'm gonna go like with about, say 1 or 2 tablespoons. Add it back in and stir it up some more. I'm gonna make sure this stays on low. I'm gonna put a cover on my pot. I'm going to let it slowly simmer for about 15 minutes so the cornmeal can cook. When this is done, I'm gonna sweeten. You could sweeten with some condensed milk if you want, or some sugar. Or if you're not into sugars or too sweet, you could do a little honey, agave, or a non-sweetening natural sugar, okay, like a plant-based sugar. So again, we're gonna let this simmer. I'm gonna put my timer on and I'll see you back in about 15 minutes. Throughout the 15-minute process, guys, you want to consistently go back and stir your pot occasionally so you don't end up with lumps in your pot. You want it to be nice and smooth. So through the process, I'm gonna come back and stir again, all right? So again, see you back in 15 minutes. Hey guys, so I'm back doing my 15-minute process is still going on, and I'm stirring again, and I'm doing a nice stir, making sure I don't feel anything sticking to the bottom of the pot. You definitely don't want anything sticking to the bottom of the pot. All right, so giving it a good stir with the whisk. All right. And then once my 15 minutes is up, I'm gonna come back, adjust my my flavors and sweeten it, and just cook for a couple more minutes. All right, so see you back again. All right, guys, so we're back. Our 15 minutes is up on this porridge. So you could see that basically what the 15 minutes did was just slowly simmer and cook the porridge. And we made sure we stirred it, you know, occasionally, which was every like 3 minutes or so. And this isn't done yet. So at this point, we could see that there's no lumps in my porridge, nothing sticking to the bottom of my pot. Now we're gonna add our flavor. So earlier we did do the cinnamon leaf. We did a little bit of nutmeg. Now we're gonna really enhance the flavor. I like to use some cinnamon powder at this point as well, besides topping it off, but just add a little to the pot. I like to add some condensed milk. I don't have much today, so I'm just gonna scoop out what's in this here. And this is gonna be my sweetener. All right, so you can add as much as you want to make it sweet. Usually, you know, depend on your taste buds, you can add as much as you want. But I'm gonna use a little bit of organic sugar, cane sugar here. For me, I like my porridge sweet, so I would say probably a little under 1/4 of a cup that I'm gonna use. I'm going to add it to my pot. Now, here's the thing. When you're doing this, guys, what you're checking for is you wanna make sure your grains are cooked. So if you don't use, these taste like they could be cooked for another 10 minutes. If you use a fine grain, your cooking time might take you about 25 minutes or so. If you use a thicker grain, it's gonna take longer. So the smaller your grain, which I will tell you, I prefer a fine grain cornmeal, it's going to cook within that 25-minute time frame. So I have the cinnamon powder I put in there. I added the sugar, which is like right texture and flavor for me. This porridge doesn't look too watery, so this is a good consistency for me. If it was too thick, I would come back and add a little bit more water or add milk. This looks nice and creamy the way I like it. So I'm done with my sugar. I'm done with my cinnamon. If I want, I can add a little bit of nutmeg if I want. Sometimes I change it up and I add a little vanilla to it. Like, you know, maybe 1/8 of a teaspoon, just a little bit to just kind of change up the flavor. So again, there's a different varieties that you could do this. So right now, my taste on this is good. I am going to allow it to simmer again between low and number 1, and not past number 2, depending on if you're using a stove top with numbers. I'm not trying to bring it to a boil. I'm just allowing the steam from the heat to slowly cook that cornmeal and make it nice and creamy where it doesn't taste, too gritty. All right, so I'm gonna give it another 10 minutes and then I should be ready to serve this for breakfast. All right, guys, so we are back. This is the last part of our cornmeal porridge for breakfast. So, we went through the process of mixing 1.5 cups of water with a 1/4 cup of cornmeal. Don't go past that because that's usually plenty of cornmeal. And then I used a half a cup of half and half. You can use, again, almond milk, coconut milk, any of your favorite creamy type products. I personally prefer milk, so I do half and half instead of regular milk, just because of that creamy consistency I want. And again, like I said, you can skip altogether the milk portion if you want, and just do the full 2 cups of water and then do like condensed milk. All right, so I added cinnamon stick to it, a little bit of cinnamon powder, a little bit of nutmeg, and a pinch of salt to give it that, flavored through the cooking process. I stirred it occasionally the first 15 minutes, came back and sweetened it up with a little bit of condensed milk and organic sugar. So this is what it looks like. I'm gonna turn off my stove. This is nice. This is the texture I personally like. It's not too thick and not too watery. If you ever did it and it's too watery, I would say you would have to start by putting a little bit more cornmeal in some cold water, mix it up real quick, add it back to the pot, which is usually gonna be in that beginning first 15 minutes, all right? So this is a nice consistency. If it's too watery and you want to keep it the way it is, you might want to bump up the heat a little bit and stir it a lot more to cook out some of that water. So those are tips to kind of help fix some of the issues you might come across. But for, I think if you follow this recipe, you'll get it to the right consistency you want. So here it is. What I usually do is I take a ladle, add it to my bowl. Now, I'm gonna give you a tip. When I used to serve this to my kids for breakfast, you want it to cool because cornmeal holds a lot of heat in it. And if you just dip a spoon in and try to put it in your mouth, it's gonna be way too hot. So as a kid, this was my secret to eating my cornmeal porridge. So what I would do as a kid when my mom would serve this to me, I would take my spoon and I would eat around the edges. I found that around the edges cool off much faster than the center. So this is how I taught my kids how to eat it. I would say to them, no, eat from the side and then work your way in, and your mouth won't burn. So I like things piping hot, but sometimes, again, this is way too hot. Now, what I serve this with, I usually love to serve this with some bread. And another way I get my kids to eat it is I would butter some bread for them and they would dip it into the cornmeal porridge and eat it. So I made some baguette here. So I'm gonna have that with some butter and some bread, and that's gonna be my breakfast. All right, guys, now that breakfast is over, I'm gonna give you one more tip. So you can put away your porridge. If you notice that this porridge got super thick while it sat, and you're going, what do I do with this? What you wanna do is put your leftover porridge in a container with a nice good lid that's gonna seal it in and not dry it out. And then when you're ready to reuse this, if you're gonna put it in a microwave, I would suggest putting some water or some milk on it, mix it up a little bit, microwave it. Personally, I like to use a stovetop. So I would dump all this back into a pot with a little bit of water or a little bit of, milk, and stir it up really good as it's heating, going through the heating process, and you have a nice bowl of porridge again for another day. All right, so great leftovers if you want to make a bigger batch and have it throughout the week, especially if you have little kids. This is like a great breakfast for them to have, and it's gluten-free. All right, guys, see you. Bye.